The silence in the Michelin star restaurant wasn't from awe, but from my mother's scream, "Where's your wife? Who pays?" The answer that followed shattered our family forever. The low hum of conversation and the clinking of wine glasses should have been a perfect soundtrack for my mother's 60th birthday. We were at Le Ciel, a restaurant so fancy the water menu had its own sommelier. My father, sister, and her husband were all there, a little constellation of forced smiles orbiting the sun that was my mother, Brenda. She was holding court, decked out in a new dress that I knew, for a fact, cost more than my first car. The only empty seat at the table was a gaping hole beside me. It was my wife Clara's seat, and its emptiness was starting to feel like a physical presence, a ghost my mother was deliberately trying to conjure. An hour before we left, Clara had called me, her voice strained and apologetic over the sounds of beeping machines. "I'm so sorry, honey," she'd said. "A 7-year-old just came into the ER, internal bleeding from a car accident. I have to scrub in. There's no way I can make it." Clara is a pediatric surgeon. Her job is saving children's lives. It's not something you argue with. I kissed her goodbye at the hospital entrance and told her not to worry, to just do what she does best. I told my mother the same thing when I arrived alone. "Clara's so sorry, Mom. A little kid was in an accident. She's in emergency surgery." My mother's smile tightened just a fraction. "Oh, of course. Well, someone has to save the world, I suppose. It's a shame she has to miss her mother-in-law's milestone birthday to do it." The guilt trip was laid on so thick you could have sliced it with a steak knife. My dad just shot me a sympathetic look from across the table and busied himself with the bread basket. Dinner was an exercise in tension. With every course, my mother would make a little comment. "This lobster is divine. Clara would have loved it if she were here." Or, "This champagne is wonderful. I hope Clara's work pays her enough for these little luxuries she never has time to enjoy." It was a masterclass in passive aggression. I just smiled and nodded, gritting my teeth, determined not to let her ruin her own night. I kept telling myself, it's her 60th, just get through it. Finally, it was time for presents. My sister gave her a spa weekend. My dad gave her a beautiful diamond necklace. She gushed over both. Then it was my turn. I slid a large, elegant envelope across the table. "Happy birthday, Mom. This is from me and Clara." Her eyes lit up as she opened it. Inside were 2 first-class tickets for a 2-week Mediterranean cruise, with a balcony suite and all the excursions paid for. It was a huge gift, something we'd been saving for. For a moment, genuine, unadulterated joy washed over her face. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. My sister oohed and awed. My dad beamed with pride. "Oh my goodness," my mother cried, fanning herself with the tickets. "Oh, this is just... it's too much. I can't believe it." She looked at me, her eyes sparkling, and then her gaze flickered to the empty chair beside me. The sparkle vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. The smile on her face didn't fall, but it curdled. She put the tickets down on the table with a soft, deliberate tap. The chatter at the table died down as everyone sensed the shift in the atmosphere. She looked right at me, her voice suddenly loud, cutting through the restaurant's gentle murmur. "This is a very, very generous gift, son," she began, her tone taking on a sharp, accusatory edge. "Very expensive. It almost makes up for the disrespect." I felt a cold dread wash over me. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Her eyes narrowed into slits. She gestured dramatically at Clara's empty chair with a flick of her wrist. "I'm talking about this grand gesture, this payment." Her voice rose with every word, drawing stares from the tables around us. My father put a hand on her arm, whispering, "Brenda, please." But she shook him off. "You come in here all smiles and throw this expensive trip at me, but where is the person who actually earned the money for it? Where is the one whose name is on the bank account that this came out of?" My blood ran cold. The entire table was frozen. "Mom, stop it," I warned. my voice low and shaking with a fury I was desperately trying to contain. But she was beyond reason. She stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at me, her face contorted in a mask of rage and entitlement. In a voice that silenced the entire restaurant, she screamed the words that would echo in my mind forever. "Where's your wife? The one who saves lives and makes all the money. The one who couldn't be bothered to show up. Where's your wife? Who pays?" The world seemed to shrink and all sound rushed out of it, replaced by a high-pitched ringing in my ears. The clatter of a fork dropping somewhere behind me was like a gunshot. Every eye in the restaurant was on our table, on my mother who stood there heaving, her face flushed with a grotesque sense of triumph. My father looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. My sister just stared, her mouth agape. And I felt nothing. The anger, the frustration, the years of quiet resentment had all burned away in that one hideous moment, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The line hadn't just been crossed, she had nuked it from orbit. Slowly, deliberately, I folded my napkin and placed it on the table beside my untouched plate of sea bass. I pushed my chair back, the sound echoing the scrape of her own, and I stood up to face her. I was taller than her, and for the first time I felt like I was looking down on her in every sense of the word. "Son, please," my father whispered, his voice cracking. "Not here. Let's just go." I held up a hand, not taking my eyes off my mother. "No," I said, my voice eerily calm, cutting through the thick silence. "She started this here. We're going to finish it here." I looked directly into her furious, expectant eyes. "You want to talk about who pays, Mom? You want to break down my marriage's finances for an audience? Is that really what you want for your 60th birthday?" Her righteous anger wavered for a second, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But she had an audience now, and Brendan never backed down from a stage. "I just think it's a shame," she spat, recovering, "that your wife has to work so hard missing important family events, while you—" She left the insult hanging in the air, the implication clear. "While I do what? Live off her?" A bitter smile touched my lips. "While I what, Mom? Go on, say it." She just glared, her chest puffing out. I nodded slowly. "I see." My gaze dropped to the elegant envelope on the table, the cruise tickets, her supposed grand prize. With a steady hand, I reached across the table and picked it up. My sister let out a small gasp. My mother's eyes widened in alarm. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice losing its booming confidence. I looked at the tickets, then back at her. "You called this a payment. You called it a grand gesture to make up for disrespect." I began to slide the tickets and itinerary back into the envelope. "You're absolutely right. It is disrespectful. It's disrespectful of me to give a gift this meaningful to someone who can only see the price tag, to someone who sees love and generosity as a transaction, to someone who would use it as a weapon to humiliate her own son and his wife, a wife who is, at this very moment, probably holding a terrified child's life in her hands." Her face went from red to a sickly pale. "Give me that," she hissed, reaching for the envelope. "That is my birthday present." I pulled it back just out of her reach. "No," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more terrifying than her scream. "It was your present. Now, it's a transaction that's been declined." I held her gaze, letting the full weight of my next words sink in. "And since you are so obsessed with the source of the funds, allow me to clarify something for you. Clara didn't pay for this." A confused frown creased her forehead. "What?" "You heard me. This wasn't her money. She works tirelessly, yes, but we are a partnership, a concept you clearly don't understand. But this trip, this particular grand gesture, was all me." I let a beat of silence hang in the air, watching the gears turn in her head. I knew what she was thinking. How could I afford it? On my salary? "I paid for it, Mom. Every single cent. I paid for it with the inheritance money." The color drained completely from her face. She knew exactly what money I was talking about. "The money Grandma Rose left for me," I continued, twisting the knife she had so eagerly handed me. "Your mother's money. The money she put in a trust that I could only access on my 30th birthday, with a letter telling me to use it to build beautiful memories with the people who truly matter. I thought, so naively, that you were one of them. I guess I was wrong." My mother stared at me as if I'd slapped her. The name Grandma Rose hung in the air between us, a ghost far more potent than Clara's. My grandmother had been the antithesis of my mother, kind, gentle, and utterly unimpressed by wealth or status. She had seen my mother's brittle nature for what it was, and their relationship had been strained for decades. The fact that Grandma Rose had left me a substantial sum, bypassing my mother almost entirely, was a wound Brenda had never allowed to heal, and I had just poured a salt mine into it. You wouldn't," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. The entire restaurant was so quiet you could hear the fizz of the champagne in her glass. She was no longer performing for the room. Her world had shrunk to me, her, and the memory of her mother. "Wouldn't I?" I asked, my voice still dangerously low. "You just screamed at me in a Michelin-star restaurant, in front of your family and 100 strangers, that I was a freeloader living off my wife. You belittled her life-saving work and tried to turn a thoughtful gift into a vulgar transaction. And you did it all on your birthday, a day that was supposed to be a celebration of you." I gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Honestly, Mom, I think this celebration has revealed more about you than any of us ever intended." I tucked the envelope containing the tickets into the inside pocket of my jacket. The finality of the act was a physical blow. She flinched. My father finally seemed to find his voice, though it was weak. "Son, let's calm down. Brenda, you were out of line. He's right. Let's just apologize and finish the meal." I turned my cool gaze on him. "An apology isn't going to fix this, Dad. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. This was who she is. It's who she's always been, just louder." I looked back at my mother. All those little digs over the years, the constant questions about Clara's salary, the backhanded compliments about how lucky I was to have married so well. I let it all slide. For Dad. For the sake of family. But tonight you showed me that to you. Family is just another word for audience. My sister Sarah, who had been frozen in horror, finally spoke up. "James, that's not fair. She's upset Clara wasn't here." "Upset?" I shot back, turning to her. "She's a surgeon, Sarah. A child was bleeding internally. What was she supposed to do? Let the kid die so my mother could have a full set of smiling faces for her birthday photo? Is that your definition of family values?" Sarah shrank back, looking at her plate. She had no answer. I straightened my tie. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving a deep, hollow ache in its place. I knew what I was about to do was irreparable. It was burning a bridge that had been crumbling for years, but it was a bridge nonetheless. "I'm done," I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I'm done with this. I'm done with the judgment, the snide remarks, and this constant toxic obsession with money and appearances." I took my wallet out, pulled out $300 bills, and placed them on the table. This should cover my meal and Clara's untouched one. My mother let out a strangled sob. "James, don't do this." I looked at her one last time, at the woman who had made me feel small my entire life, who saw her successful daughter-in-law not as a brilliant, compassionate person, but as a walking ATM. I felt a strange mix of pity and disgust. "You wanted to know who pays, Mom," I said, my voice flat and devoid of all emotion. "From now on, you do. You pay for your own things, you pay for your own choices, and you will pay the price for your own words." I turned and walked away from the table. I didn't look back. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on me, but I didn't care. I walked past the maitre d', who averted his gaze with professional discretion. I pushed through the heavy oak doors and stepped out into the cool night air. The sounds of the city rushed in to fill the silence, a welcome relief. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking slightly. It was over. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a frantic call from my dad or my sister, but it wasn't them. It was a text from Clara. Surgery went well. Little girl is stable. I'm exhausted. How's the party? Sorry again I missed it. Love you. A wave of emotion so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. Love, pride, relief. I quickly typed a reply. Don't be sorry. You're a hero. I love you more. On my way to you. As I hit send, another car, a sleek black sedan I recognized, pulled up to the curb just ahead of me. The passenger door opened, and my sister Sarah got out, her face streaked with tears. James, wait, she called out, running towards me. You can't just leave like that. You have to come back. There's nothing to go back to, Sarah, I said tiredly. Yes, there is, she insisted, grabbing my arm. You don't understand. It's not just about Mom being awful. There's something else. Something Dad told me after you left. It's about the money, not Grandma Rose's money. It's about theirs. I stared at my sister, at the genuine panic in her tear-filled eyes. What are you talking about, Sarah? What about their money? For a moment, I thought it was just a desperate ploy to get me back inside, another act in the family drama. They're broke, James, she blurted out, her voice cracking. Like, completely broke. Dad lost almost everything in some bad investments a few months ago. The business, the savings. It's almost all gone. He didn't want to tell anyone until he figured a way out, but... She gestured helplessly back towards the restaurant. Tonight was a farce. This whole dinner, Mom's dress, the gifts. It was all put on credit cards they can't pay off. They were counting on you, on Clara. The words hit me like a physical shock. All the pieces suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. My mother's escalating obsession with Clara's salary, the thinly veiled desperation in her voice, the way her rage had zeroed in on the financial aspect of Clara's absence. It wasn't about disrespect. It was about fear. She wasn't angry that Clara the person wasn't there. She was terrified that Clara the safety net wasn't there. Counting on me for what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. To help them, Sarah whispered. Dad was going to talk to you this week, to ask for a loan, a big one. Mom thought... She thought that cruise was your way of showing off, of rubbing your success in her face when they were drowning. That's why she snapped. It was awful and wrong, but she's just terrified. A cold, heavy knot formed in my stomach. It wasn't pity, not yet. It was something more complex. The anger was still there, but it was now aimed at a lifetime of lies and misplaced pride. They were willing to let their son believe he was a disappointment, a leech, rather than admit they had failed. My mother would rather lash out in a public spectacle of cruelty than show a moment of vulnerability. Get in the car, Sarah, I said, my voice firm. We're not going back in there. We're going to the hospital. The drive was silent. Sarah sniffled quietly in the passenger seat, and I just focused on the road, my mind racing. When we arrived, I found Clara in the residence lounge, slumped in a chair, still in her scrubs, nursing a cup of coffee. She looked exhausted, but beautiful. Her face lit up when she saw me, then clouded with concern when she saw Sarah's tear-stained face behind me. What happened? Is everything okay? She asked, getting to her feet. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her, burying my face in her hair. I just held her for a moment, drawing strength from her. Everything is not okay, I said softly against her ear, but it will be. I pulled back, and with Sarah providing the mortifying details, I explained everything. The scream, the inheritance, the revelation about my parents' finances. Clara listened patiently, her expression shifting from shock to anger and finally to a deep, weary sadness. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. She looked at me, then at Sarah, then back at me. So, she said finally, her voice steady, She called my husband a freeloader and tried to shake us down for money all in the same breath. That's quite a birthday celebration. Clara, I'm so sorry, Sarah sobbed. She had no right. Clara gave her a small, tired smile. No, she didn't. But she's still your mother. And yours, she said, looking at me. So, what do we do? And in that moment, looking at my incredible wife, I knew exactly what Grandma Rose had meant by building memories with people who truly matter. It wasn't about lavish trips. It was about showing up. It was about facing ugly truths together. First, I said, pulling out the envelope with the cruise tickets, we're taking a vacation. Just us. We've earned it. I handed the envelope to Clara. Her eyes widened, but she took it. And my parents? I took a deep breath. They made their bed. They have to lie in it for a while. No loan, no bailout. They need to face the consequences of their pride. They need to sell the house, downsize their lives, and learn what's actually important. I turned to Sarah. You and your husband can help them with the logistics. We will help with advice. We will be there for emotional support. We will be their children, but we will not be their bank. The ATM is closed. Permanently. Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. It was a harsh solution, but she knew it was the right one. The only one that might actually fix the brokenness in our family. The next day, my father called. He was a broken man, full of apologies and shame. I told him our decision. It was a difficult conversation, but for the first time, it was an honest one. He didn't argue. My mother refused to speak to me for 3 months, but when the for sale sign went up on their lawn, I got a one-line text from her. Your grandmother would be proud of you. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was a start, a crack in the armor. Clara and I took that cruise. We sailed through the Greek Isles, drank wine on our balcony, and talked about everything and nothing. One evening, watching the sunset over Santorini, she turned to me. Are you okay? With everything? I looked out at the endless, shimmering water. I am, I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm not paying for someone else's expectations. I pulled her close and kissed her. The humiliation in the restaurant had been the price of admission, but the freedom we found on the other side of it was priceless. My mother had screamed, "Who pays?" And the answer was finally clear. We all pay, one way or another. But from now on, Clara and I were only paying for things that truly mattered.